I have with me today Professor Mark Zweig. Mark is a very successful entrepreneur and leader, and he's also a very successful and outstanding professor. Thank you for joining me today, Mark.
It's my pleasure, Matt.
If you want to know more about Mark's business background, we have a video of him where I interviewed him about his businesses over the years, and I recommend you watch it. We also have something called Walton Insights, which is where we keep our new blogs. And Mark is a weekly contributor to that blog. Mark writes well and has lots of experience writing. Before we get into this topic, tell me about your writing. Your writing has actually been a key to your business success.
It has been, actually. Well, I started out as the editor of my junior high and then high school newspaper. So I went to journalism camp at University of Missouri-Columbia, and I got first prize in beginning editorial. And that set my career off as a writer. That was, I think, between 7th and 8th grade.
Well, then you had the Zweig letter.
The Zweig letter's been published weekly. I used to be the editor of another management newsletter for the architecture and engineering industry. And then when I started my own business, I had a non-compete that I had to let run out. It was a paid subscription vehicle, this other newsletter. And so I wrote a free newsletter, and I styled it after the Kiplinger report, if you remember that.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Courier font and just, sort of staccato little mini articles on whatever was on my mind. And I did that I did that once a month for 3 years. And then as soon as my non-compete ran out, I turned that into a paid subscriber-based vehicle. It came out twice a month. And I think we charged initially $195 a year for it. Eventually it got to a weekly, and we charged $475 a year, and we had several thousand subscribers. But over time, paid subscription newsletters lost their luster. It was got harder and harder to sell. So we decided it was such a great vehicle that we just turned it into a free publication. And now we send it out. I don't know exactly what the circulation is, but it's somewhere around 10 or 20,000.
What year did you start the Zweig letter?
I started it in '88 as the free version, and then it went to paid in '91.
Well, and I want to emphasize that Mark has a very successful track record as an entrepreneur and business owner, and his writing skills are quite remarkable. I would encourage you to read some of his blogs, but we want to talk about one blog in particular today.
All right.
You wrote a blog recently about you can't just cut costs to improve profit. And I read it, and it really resonated with me, and I think anyone who has business experience would see it as important. But after I read it, I thought every student in the Walton College should read this. Would you tell me just a little bit about the idea?
Well, the idea was born out of working as a management consultant for years. Really starting in 1988. Well, I started in 1980 out of grad school, and I worked in a consulting firm for 3 years, and then went to work for several of my clients, and then started my own business in 1988. And so I worked with thousands of architecture and engineering companies. But then when I came here to teach, starting in 2005, I taught a class called Small Enterprise Management. And in my Small Enterprise Management class, the students, I came up with this project, work with a small business to increase their revenue, increase their profit, reduce the risk, and increase the value of the enterprise. And it's very wide-ranging. They can use any number of means in order to make the recommendations that they make to the owners. And so I got to see, several thousand companies through my own experience and vicariously through my students. And there's no question about it. I think the first response of most people and most business owners when it comes time to increase the bottom line is, what costs can we cut? And it's so inherent in the thought process. Last year, I had a student tell me that that was one of the requirements of his project. I said, where is that? He said, well, it says you have to increase profitability. I said, but that doesn't mean the only way to do that is by reducing costs. So usually that provides short-term benefits, and then the next thing you know, you've got to cut costs again, and the next thing you know, you've got to cut costs again. So anybody who's run a business knows a downward spiral of cost cutting and revenue reductions is very hard to ever get out of. So what I've learned over the years is there are some alternatives to cost cutting. One of them being, we used to call this in the marketing business, shoot your way out of it. And that is increase your marketing and advertising expenditures so you raise revenue. And by raising revenue, but not increasing your overhead beyond the additional marketing costs, usually what happens is you become more profitable.
You know, I've seen some statistics that show that if you look at the amount of money spent on marketing as a percentage of corporate revenue
Yes.
in the United States, it's actually been very steady over the years, but the mix has changed.
Oh, sure.
You know, now it's gone way towards digital and less towards traditional
Well, management
media.
loves digital because they can track the results. So they feel if they don't get immediate results, they do something different. And there's some logic to that, but there's also logic to brand building. So when anyone has a need for whatever it is you're selling, or if they're faced with alternative products or services from different companies, yours is the one that stands out as being most familiar and the safest choice. And people will pay a premium for that. You know, I used to travel around the country teaching marketing to architects and engineers, and I had 2 bottles of soda, 2-liter bottles. One was Coca-Cola, and one was Roach Brothers Cola. And Roach Brothers is a company based in the Boston area. It's a grocery store chain. So I thought it was funny to have the Roach Cola. But, you know, I'd show people, look at these 2 bottles. This one, the Coke is $1.69. The Roach Cola is 69 cents. The bottles are virtually identical. Same extrusion mark, same cap. The fluid inside looks the same. You do a blind taste test, about half the people like the Roach Cola as much as those who like the Coca-Cola. But why do we pay $1 more for this one than we pay for Coke than we pay for the Roach Cola? Well, it certainly wasn't because Coca-Cola minimizes their marketing overhead. In fact, we looked it up the other day in class. They spend 18.6%, if I'm not mistaken, of revenue on marketing.
Wow.
Okay? That is a lot. So by funding that, I call it an off-balance sheet investment, you increase demand for the product, which allows you to raise prices, have better quality, and continue the virtuous cycle.
Well, you know, the other thing about digital marketing now, and by the way, that's a great way to explain brand equity. But, you know, with digital marketing now, you were mentioning people like it because they can track things. And, you know, it used to be that firms had to rely on objective demographics almost exclusively from a marketing perspective. But now, with digital media, digital marketing, you can actually start looking at subjective psychographics because people and their behavior in social media reveals attitudes, values, those kinds of preferences. And so now these firms are able to merge the objective demographics with the subjective psychographics.
Well, that's interesting. You know, one of the things that we have our students do in their project, in our new venture class, is create what they call a target customer collage. And that has the psychographics.
Interesting.
So it's, who is your ideal customer? You know, what do they listen to? What do they watch? What kinds of clothes do they wear? Where do they live? What are they into? And so if you can paint that picture and stay focused on your target customer, understanding that they're a complete person, not just how much money they make, what their income levels are, you know, in classic sort of demographic, or how old they are, classic demographic data, that you do a better job with your marketing. But that's a subject of another
It is, but it's a very relevant, and so many small businesses and big businesses kind of, they shoot their way out of it in a blind way as opposed to precision shooting their way out of
Exactly.
it, so to speak.
Yeah, they forget who their target customer is. That's one of the reasons why in this article that you referenced about increasing profitability, we recommend, well, oftentimes, not in every case, but specialization. If you can take a business and you can focus on a narrow target market and become really, really good at serving them, it allows you to charge more and be more efficient. You know, I think I used the example of an exercise facility that aims at pregnant women or women who are recovering from pregnancy as opposed to one that serves everyone. You know, they'll have different equipment, the trainers will be different, the place will look different, it'll feel different, the women will be more comfortable who go in there. Maybe they have to have child care for early, very young children. But by focusing on that market, you can target your marketing and become a lot more efficient, and you do use more of a rifle shot. It was the same thing with our own business. At Zweig Group, we focus just on architects and engineers. So by being able to define your market in that way, your marketing's much more efficient. Our business was really built on direct mail and PR, and then we moved to e-marketing later on. But a narrow target market makes your marketing so much more efficient. But then you turn that crank faster and faster, and you put more into it.
Yeah, there's such a tendency of firms to want to appeal to everybody.
Yeah.
It's too early. Eventually, you can expand your focus.
Exactly. I see this all the time. In fact, I was just counseling 3 students who started a marketing consulting company. I think I mentioned them to you before we started this interview today. And that's what I'm encouraging them to do, is really focus. They've got some good experience. Now, they can work for consumer product companies. They can work for professional service industries. They're doing some work for the Walton College. One of the thoughts was maybe they should really use that as leverage to work for other colleges and universities. Become really good at that. And that then allows them to really focus their marketing so much more effectively.
So what are some other variables that you can use to improve profits without just cutting costs?
Well, I think, along with this idea of specialization, is differentiation. How else can you really differentiate your offerings from other people? I think if you look at, for example, here we have 1 million taco restaurants in Fayetteville, Arkansas, right? Or even more if we head north to Springdale, Rogers. But Tacos for Life is a good example where they buy a meal for everyone who buys a meal at Tacos for Life. Now, the meal, my understanding is like 22 cents of rice. It's not the same meal that you're eating. But just being able to do a little bit of good for somebody else, it's the Tom's Shoe model, they're copying that. But that in itself has kept Tacos for Life busy all the time. I don't know if you've been there, but my sense tells me they're doing very well over there. We've had some other taco restaurants that have come and gone during the time since they started. Just that little differentiation, maybe their tacos are no better than anybody else's. But the fact that you're providing that meal for somebody else makes you want to go there. Everybody has to have some kind of differentiation. The more meaningful that differentiation really is, and the more valuable it is to your customers, then the more business you're going to get in a crowded market.
And you can really find out from your customers what the differentiation should be in many cases. I think of your consulting firm. You had access to a tremendous amount of information, and you started that benchmarking report.
We do over 20 studies a year, 20 reports a year that are published on the industry. It's, of course, having that data is fantastic. One of them is called the Principals Report, where we survey the owners of firms. We get full demographic data. We find out their political orientations, their sexual orientations, their drinking habits, how large their offices are, what kind of cars they drive, everything. and what their burning priorities and problems are. And that is very valuable information to us. So we actually sell that data. Not only do we collect that data and use it in our own business to tailor our offerings, but we sell that back to the audience themselves at a profit. It's a fantastic business. The research business has consistently been one that, approaches 7 figures in annual income just from turning out those reports. And then, of course, it's great information. But back on the subject of differentiation, I mean, you see so many businesses that look and feel alike, and then, of course, they're victims of the economy. Whenever the demand declines, well, they'll decline along with the market. But if you've got something that's a little bit better, a little bit different, Chick-fil-A is another one. Love them or hate them. And people are on both sides of the fence. They're always in the top revenue generators of restaurants in this area. And if you look at their sales, here I've seen 6 million, 6.5 million in a location. A normal fast food restaurant here of a chain restaurant, I know some people that own several of them. $2 million a year is a good volume. They're doing 6 million. One of the reasons, is it because their chicken's so much better than anybody else's? Honestly, I don't think it is. In fact, it may not even be as good as some other offerings we have around here. But what they do is they treat you so well when you come in.
Yeah, the service is unbelievable.
It is. If you have kids, they offer to bring the food out to you. They get you whatever you want. They bring it to your table. They've always got a smile on their face. Now, that is their strategy, is we're just going to be better at service than everybody else. They do 3 times the volume. I would imagine their profitability is probably equally high.
That's what's so, to me, enjoyable about business, and why I feel so good about leading the college of business. Business is about making life better for people.
Absolutely. And it touches everything that we do. And it takes all your skills if you want to be good at it.
And it also allows us to use our own unique capabilities and interests and passions in a way that helps other people.
Exactly. I think that's one of the things, that we teach people about starting a business is if you see a problem, odds are other people have the same problem. How can you solve that problem? How can you make their life better? And so that's absolutely true.
Yeah, just as a simple example, not having a lot of hair on my head, I have to wear a hat when I'm out in the sun, right?
I understand.
But in the summertime, I don't like to wear a hat because it makes me hot.
Sure.
And I've looked for hats that are, and I wear a suit a lot. Mm-hmm. Or I'm at least dressed business casual. And it's very hard to find hats that fit that. As I've mentioned this to other people, I say, okay, this is an easy opportunity here.
That's right.
And if you Google it, you can't find solutions to it. And I like to use that as an example because it was, and I don't have the time, I'm running the college.
The college of business, sure.
But I thought, if I did have the time, I'd be tempted to try to solve that problem.
No, that's a good point.
Which would then help a bunch of people. It might even prevent people from getting skin cancer.
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. That is one of the great things about business. But in any case, I think when you go back to this whole notion of profitability, I would rather grow the revenues than I would cut the costs. And if you can grow the revenues fast enough, and this has been my experience in every business I was ever an owner in, every successful business, I should say, because I've been an owner on a few that weren't as successful. If we can keep the revenue stream growing at a faster rate than the costs, which typically happens, if it grows fast enough, you can't even pile the cost on fast enough, believe it or not. The problems occur when the revenue growth stops. And then the cost will inevitably ratchet up over time. People get raises, costs go up on supplies, whatever. Everything goes up. So you got to focus on that revenue growth and how can you keep growing that revenue. It's so much more positive too.
Absolutely. I mean, would you rather collaborate with a company who's growing revenue or a company that's cutting costs?
Exactly.
Would you rather work for a firm that's growing revenue or work for a firm that's cutting costs, right? experience tells you the answer is simple.
It really is. And, so, yeah, the growing firm has more opportunities for the people. But the other thing is that the growing firm, it's more valuable. I mean, if you want to talk about it from an entrepreneurship standpoint, everybody talks the classic, well, what's my business worth? Well, it's so many times EBIT, right? You hear this all the time. But in reality, there are loads of businesses that are worth billions of dollars. Maybe not loads, but there are many worth billions of dollars that haven't even made a profit yet because they have this constantly growing revenue stream. Now, obviously, someone thinks at some point it will become profitable.
Well, and the growing revenue stream is a signal that it's highly valued by people, that
the market likes it.
It's actually adding more value than it's taking.
That's it. That's exactly right. That is the sign. The market really likes what we've got. What else can we do for that market?